Welcome to today's session. For those of you joining afterwards, it's really nice to see you watching these links. And for everyone we've got here live on the session, it's nice to have you back in person. We are going to continue our series of webinars today. And in those webinars, we've been looking at what you need to become a Google Educator Level 1. But from that very series of things that we're looking at, we are considering the different apps that are available in Google Workspace and just how they can enhance you working as an educator in school or college, but also how that can enrich the experience for the pupils and students that you're working with. If you are just coming along with this for your own professional development, that's absolutely fine. But the benefit at the same time is that this will give you all of the areas that are going to come up in the Google Educator Level 1 exam. And in the last session of this series, we'll also look at some resources that will help you to prepare, look at question types. But just a reminder from the first session, you will need to register with Google, and then the final exam will need to be sat whenever you feel that you're ready. It doesn't have to be when this series of webinars complete. We have quite a packed schedule to come still. So here we are on Thursday, 25th of November, looking at a couple more units to think how we can create an immersive and interactive learning content to share with pupils and students. That then leaves 2 more sessions to go on the run up until Christmas. They'll look at the remaining 2 areas that will prepare you to be a Google Educator Level 1. And then it's taking time to thoroughly prep, to work your way through some sample questions, and then sit the examination once you feel that you are ready. If you are wondering where the recordings are, I've had a couple of people ask that. At the end of this session, I will show you the link where you can go and pick up the YouTube channel where we've got all of the recorded sessions there. They're all available for you, so it's no problem at all. You can watch those in your own time, and as I'm aware, as I said earlier, some people are. So session 5 is all about creating interactive online learning content. It's really immersive. It brings pupils and students in. It's something that they find almost addictive to come and get involved in. And it could be that you've been traditionally using paper versions of something, and that what we're going to look at today, the online versions, just give you that extra edge. It's something that hooks into them exploring the world around them, but using technology to do that. We're not saying that this will replace any traditional teaching methods, but what it does is it complements them really well. And even if you're in a school that hasn't got Chromebooks, you'll be able to still use the technology. It works really well in the Google web browser. It's Google Chrome. So whichever way you look at it, it will be fine to use everything we're going to have today, even if you are looking at another operating system in your school. So the 2 units that we're going to look at and focus on are units 9 and units 10. These are smaller than some of the units we've looked at in the previous sessions, but still quite a bit to explore. We will be considering how we develop that digital literacy and the tools that we've got available to us. And the first one is obviously the web browser that we're using all the time, Google Chrome. And then on the back of that, we'll look at an app that's really useful to link into some of the other Google apps that we've discussed previously, such as getting content into docs, slides, or maybe sheets, and how to then build the immersive resources in there. But whichever way you look at it, whether you're going to use the resource itself, the Google app that's dedicated, or you're going to bring content from one Google app and pop it into another, such as you may have captured a map from Google Maps and you're going to put it into Google Slides. There's various things that you can do to make that content even more immersive and interactive. So moving through, don't forget, if you want to leave any comments, you can pop them in the chat. I'll leave the chat open. I won't lock it at the end of the meeting. One of the things that I want you to think about, either away from this session or have a think now, is how you've made pupil learning more immersive and more interactive. I'll just give you a minute just to have a look at that. While you're thinking about that, you may have some examples. I can see people typing now. While you are doing that, you might want to think yourself, have you seen others around the school using Google apps that you've got in Google Workspace really, really effectively to draw pupils in? Could be something like App Builder. I've seen a lot of teachers have a great deal of success taking apps and building them with pupils. And from Key Stage 2 upwards, is quite an accessible app. See, someone there has said that they've used Google Maps quite frequently. It is something that's pretty much universal, and I've seen various different subjects have a lot of success with it. I'll leave that question there for you to ponder, but we'll move on in today's session. So the first thing is to look at Google Chrome itself. In Google Chrome, you might just take it for granted. It's always there, but it does so many things. And you're also going to get quizzed on your understanding of what Google Chrome can do. So Google Chrome, as you will have used it, you may open it up and you don't have to be signed in. If you're working in a Google school that has Chromebooks and you've got a Google Workspace account, once you sign into the Chromebook, you'll be signed into all other apps. If you're using a different operating system, it can be slightly different. So when you go into the Google Chrome browser, you can sign in. The benefits of signing in is that it's got all of your bookmarks, it's got your history, and it personalizes that browser to you and it makes it your own workspace. Also, if you need to get to resources, such as it's in your Google Drive, that means that it goes directly to your Google Drive, and everything you do in that session will then be remembered when you sign in. One important thing to remember, if you're using a shared device or you've got a login, it's not your own, and you're borrowing someone else's, or you're on a communal computer, make sure you do sign out of the Google Chrome web browser if you finish with that. I think it's a good opportunity there just to swap over and away from the presentation, have a look at some of the other features in Google Chrome. So I'm just going to swap tabs and move away from this. And I'm going to share my entire browser window now. When it syncs, any second. Okay, you should very quickly now see my Google Chrome browser. So when it comes to it, first of all, you've got, as a landing page in the Chrome browser, you've got the Omnibox. The Omnibox is the go-to place, whether you're using a Chromebook or whether you're just using the browser version. As you will have used a million times, you can type it in. If you need to have support because maybe you've got a physical disability, you don't have to use the keyboard. You can use search by voice. So as far as accessibility to learning resources, it's really important that people know they can use that. And then you can get to search for whichever resource you want in the browser. Where you sign in, as I was describing earlier, is to press the sign in box. And if you are signed in, you will then get, as I said, your customized versions of the apps or the content within the apps. And the benefit of that is that everything stays live in the cloud. So you can move from device to device. It's a seamless experience that you just pick up where you left off and you can continue. The other thing to do is to say at the top, you've got the Google Chrome Omnibox here, and you can search also there too. So whether you're using the Google search or the Google Chrome search, it's very similar, and you don't have to use the box in the middle. You can use the address bar, and if you wanted to say, I want to know about Big Ben in London, I'm doing a research project, type into there directly, and I don't need to have the search box in the middle of the screen. It just means that you haven't got to keep opening up more and more tabs, and that they are then dependent upon you going backwards. So the other thing, and we're already in it, is to have incognito sessions. So if you want to have an incognito session, you press the three dots on the side. You can either open up a new window, which is a normal browsing session. I'm running a couple of browsers here, so I'm in the incognito version already. But if you want to come to a new incognito window, you just click new incognito window, and you know you're in incognito mode because you've got a darker colored black theme around the outside. The normal Google Chrome browser will have a white background, and it's the way that you distinguish between the two. We've spoken about using Omnibot search bar. Most people do it without thinking about it, but sometimes the terminology catches people out when they come to do the Google Educator Level 1 exam, so we're just referencing it here today. You've also got available to you in the Chrome Web Store a whole raft of apps that you can install. So if I went to the Chrome Web Store, because I'm in the incognito version, I cannot install any apps. What I can do is I can browse and have a look around, and I can find ones that are useful to me. You will have certain things that Google Apps do really, really well, and you won't necessarily have to go and find other apps to do the jobs that you want. But you sometimes need extensions or you need other apps. So extensions are really useful. They will sit up here next to where the incognito sign is on a normal browsing session. Extensions that are extremely useful could be things like Grammarly. Grammarly will check your spelling and grammar as you're going through, but there are other things that are also really useful to have open. So if you are working with the EAL pupils and you think it could be extremely useful to have Google Translate sat up there as an extension, add it in, embed it in your browser. It will work actively to translate the content in your native language to other languages, but also for pupils and students, it's good for them to have that extension in sometimes if they need to get the content that you're creating in one language, which decreases your workload, available in another language, and so you can use it. Is an endless amount of extensions that you can have, but those extensions really are when you've got a need for it. So it could be, as we'll look at later on in this session, it could be that you've taken some bookmarks out of Google Maps, out of Google Chrome, and you've got them and you need to get them into, let's say, Google Slides. Well, Google Slides doesn't necessarily do that easily, but what you could do is you can get an extension or an app which helps you to embed. So all of these apps, I would say, you'll get some which are really, really high profile, and some which you just need to go and find when you've got certain jobs that you need to do that aren't covered, and you need just an extra job or an extra piece of software that will do it. Moving back then from the Google Chrome Web Store, you've got to also think about down here splitting it out by category. So if you know you're after, for instance, a good app for blogging, and blogging is something that you do regularly, there's lots of partner apps that will sit quite nicely within your browser and make sure that you've got all the tools that you need. So do have a good look around. There is a high chance that you'll get a question in the Google Educator Level 1 is, where could you add apps into your Google Chrome browser? Well, it's the Google Chrome Web Store. And then once you're there, as long as you're not in incognito mode and you're in normal mode, it will be absolutely fine that you can go in and add those too. Moving back over. When you are in that Chrome Web Store, you click on an app and you can easily install them. So if it was going to be, let's say, Fiv Analytics, you click on it and in it goes. What it looks like, if I swap over and show you the other version of it. So if I go in a non-incognito session and I swap over, and I'll just swap windows just so you can see what that looks like. Swapping over now to normal Google Chrome browser window. Here are some apps that I've got installed. So there is Grammarly. There's various different apps that are quite useful. And if you want to uninstall those apps or remove them, which you need to be able to understand how you take the extensions that you've added to your browser, you can either click here and under more actions, you can pin it or uninstall it. But at the same time, if you need to uninstall altogether, go to manage extensions, and then in there you can just choose which ones you're going to remove. And it's as simple as pressing the remove button and that will take it out. So you can see some Chrome apps that I've already installed. They're ones that I find as extensions that are quite useful, but they aren't the only ones. So another one that's really useful, if I go into the web store and would be such as, if I go up to search box, there's another one which is really useful, and it's called Great Suspender. Great Suspender, Google Chrome is a bit of a hog as far as your resource is concerned. But if you want something that's quite lightweight and it makes your browser work really easily, you can use what's called the Great Suspender, which is a good example of an extension that many people that are very Google orientated use. So if I go back over to the Chrome Web Store, share that with you, and on the Chrome Web Store, I go back to the top and we search for the Great Suspender. Great Suspender is a tool that when you've got lots and lots of tabs open, and I mean lots, 40, 50 tabs, the tabs that you don't want to have taking up processing capacity of your computer, you can suspend them. And when you suspend them, they will sit in the background, but they come back almost instantly, but decrease the load and the pressure on your computer. So there's lots of examples. Grammarly and Great Suspender are two, but there's plenty more out there that are really, really useful. There's people that spend their lives compiling charts of the most useful Google Chrome apps and extensions. So just dig around, see what you think could be useful for you, and then make sure that you go back and install those. As far as the Google search is concerned, the main Google search, which is built into a Chromebook, and I'm not on a Chromebook today, but I am using Google Chrome browser. When you open it up at the bottom of the main Chromebook page, the Google search searches absolutely everything on the Chromebook. And just like the Omnibox in the Google Chrome web browser, it helps you to find not just information on the internet that you could use to create enriched immersive experiences, but also find content that you can then add into things like slides and docs when you're working with the pupils that you have in school. So the reason that Google want to promote the browser and finding content on Big Ben is whether you're simply bringing in a video or whether you're going to make things more interactive by saying, look, you want a GIF of Big Ben, and then maybe you see what that GIF looks like. And then that GIF itself, which would be like Big Ben in the rain, we'll take a copy of that, and it'll always be aware of copyright and images you're going to be using. I'm going to go into my slide deck here. I think I'll just I'm going to add a caption slide, and I'm going to pop Big Ben in. And then when I use that presentation, Big Ben will work. So this might be Big Ben in the winter. And what I'm going to talk about is the restoration that's been going on. So Big Ben in the winter. And then the restoration is the bit I'll discuss when I'm making that presentation. Jumping back over again, some other content that you'll be expected to demonstrate knowledge of. So it might not be GIFs, but it might be a video, and getting those video links from YouTube. We'll look at YouTube in more depth next time. Or it could be just simply for research that complements book-based research. It might complement having guest speakers or going on a field trip to London, but all of that is another way of getting more information and then using it to make things more immersive and interactive. It could be researching to create a wall display, or maybe you're making a model of Big Ben and you need to know some information about its dimensions. But the fact that Google Chrome is there as a really reliable browser to drill down and find information is something that you need to be aware of. The next area, and it's Unit 10 under Google Educator Level 1, is to make sure that you can use Google Earth insightfully. Knowing how to search, things like My Places, how to use some of the functions on there to go from Street View to Global View, and use your Pegman. Also things like the Voyager mode, and we'll have a look at those now. So I'm just going to swap over so we've got Google Chrome and the Google Earth version open in Google Chrome. I must say you can have Google Earth installed as well, but the web browser version is great and it does everything that I needed to do on a daily basis. So that's the version I am going to use today. Looks to me like we might need to just open that again. I'll just reopen Google Earth and then reshare. Okay, just going over now. There we go. Right, okay. So landed on Big Ben. Big Ben's part of the research project that we've been doing, obviously in London. So very, very simple things. Toggling between 2D and 3D is down in here. So if you want the 3D view, you can switch it on, and this then takes the buildings around the area of London and it will put them into 3 dimensions. Some older laptops do struggle when you enable 3D mode, but if you want to go back to a top-down plan view, if you just re-enable 2D, then Google Earth mimics more like Google Maps, and you can see what's there. If you want to change your view and your overlays, what's in here, this is called exploration mode, so that gives you more of a realistic sort of aerial photograph picture. But what you can do is you can clean that up and have it look more like a map, or you can have everything together. But if that doesn't suit you, the custom option at the bottom allows you to choose the bits you do want so that this view will display in exactly the way that you have your preference. You can do things like here, turn off the 3D buildings, which does help if you've got a lower spec computer. But most modern computers with a reasonable sized processor will cope absolutely fine with that. Over here, if you click the Pegman, it will show you where you can view on this map from Google Street View. Google Street View is where cameras have gone either on water or on road, and there's a way to get down into the map that we're looking at here from an aerial point of view and see what a place looks like. So if we wanted to see Big Ben from the river, let's click on where a boat's been through the river. So I'm going to zoom in down, and then my street view here is from a boat. Now we could, if we wanted to, go along backwards and forwards using the arrows, but we're going to try and have a look at Big Ben and see if we can get to Big Ben here. And let's have a look around. There's Big Ben there. There's the rest of the River Thames. And you can choose which way you want to go. So if I go back around that way, and there is Big Ben. Now, if I don't want to stay in Street View, all I've got to do is click the Pegman again, and I've come back out. So some of the terms you'll be really familiar with because we use these tools in everyday life, but it's thinking about how we bring them into education and make more of them in education. If you need to find a location, the search box, the Omnibox is there again. You'll always have suggestions, but quite handily, you'll have recent searches at the top. If you want to just get lucky and try somewhere around the world, which can be good, sometimes you may use it as a lesson starter or a talking point. It might be what I call the place of the day, which I've done with some classes. We roll a dice in the morning, or we roll a dice at a certain point in the day. And then it's just one of those things where it might stimulate a discussion. It might be curiosity. It could result in another project. I've had all sorts of things happen of rolling the dice, but one of the good things is it's safe. So from a safeguarding and e-safety point of view, you haven't got to worry about you'll roll a dice and end up somewhere completely inappropriate. It will give you a view on a map. And sometimes there's a lot to talk about because it's a really famous place or it's a place of interest. Other times it might be completely unknown and people need to go and do a bit more research, or you can use Google Earth itself to give you some of that information. So there's examples of that on here. The other thing that you will need to get familiar with is Voyager. Voyager is curated trips around the globe on different themes, and they do change depending on the time of year and what's in the news and what's topical. So if we move across, recently there was, let's have a look, COP26, which was the global conference where we're trying to think about climate change and minimizing it. Well, Google, in response to that in the Voyager series, decided to look at what would happen if we got a global change of temperature and climates decided to warm and by different amounts. So you can see there's a picture of Manhattan in New York, but let's try touring some other cities. So that is Manhattan, but I think we'll move forward. Let's see if we can find London as we were looking at Big Ben ourselves. There we go. There's London and Big Ben. So what you can do is from the Voyager view, what this will do is it will simulate and model what will happen if you get 4 degrees of global warming, or maybe lesser, and we do something about it, it's 2 degrees. So you can see the picture change there, but also the Google map changes at the same time. So we could go and have a look on our Google map and just try to see what was going to happen. And we could say, for instance, well, we're looking at the bridge and what's going to happen with Big Ben. We could say also what's going to happen with the London Eye there. Well, certainly the London Eye is going to be, if I zoom in a bit, is going to end up being partially submerged. There is the pontoon and the moorings for the boats. Well, that's completely underwater. And if we come back and we have a look at the streets, and there we've got Trafalgar Square. The bottom end of Trafalgar Square is underwater, and moving towards the river, there'll be certain things like rail lines will be cut off, road infrastructure will be interrupted. And these voyages can take you in all sorts of different directions. You may want to pre-vet them in advance and know that there's one there that you can direct people to, or you may want them to go and find their own voyage by clicking the button and find something that interests them and then come back and present to the class. And so you can use it as almost like another roll of the dice to find something that interests them or something that might be of interest to the class or broaden the horizons. So Fragile Beauty is another one about how fragile our Earth is and how we need to look after it. I think this one was about deforestation. But there's lots of different voyages, and the voyages there are always on the side. There we go, meandering rivers. So you might want to talk about oxbow rivers. But what you could do is go back in time and see how those rivers have changed over a period of time and how those rivers made their way through certain areas and how they've now look radically different, or the flow of the river. It's one of those things where it doesn't have to be limited to the obvious subjects. Geography and history tend to use Google Earth a lot, but I've seen some other people. Here comes the run through the different time frames. The actual map seems to be slightly distorted there, but you can see it's running through the timeline here right up to present day. The other subjects which I've seen really successfully use it, so it might be that we want to have Stonehenge, because we're doing an arts project. And we're going to go to Stonehenge, quickly jump over to Stonehenge, get around the other side of the globe. In we come. So Stonehenge itself, I'm going to use the Pegman. There it is. And we want to, drawing it from an art perspective, we're looking at historical England. I'm going to say, well, the beauty of Google Maps is I can get to places where we couldn't go even if we went and visited the site. So I'm going to click on the Google Street View, which is also available in Google Earth. This must have been during a solstice because all those people have taken pictures. What I could do is I could have a look at structures. Now, we might be modeling this. We might be trying to get a feel for what it's like and what those stones look like. We could be drawing surfaces and textures in art. We could be thinking of materials we could use to model the surfaces. So we're looking at what rocks look like. But there's lots of different scope to use an app like Google Earth across different areas of the curriculum to make that content more immersive. One of the other ways you can do it and still stay in control of the direction of the learning and the lesson is to go to projects. So what I did here was that I pressed new project. A few minutes ago, I made a project on London. So I go into my London project. What I could do in here are add certain places around London. So I'm going to add a new feature and I'm going to add a new place. So in my new place, I might say I am going to add in Big Ben because it's been a theme of today. So we're going to go to Big Ben in London. So off we go. It's going to jump back over. It should drop back into London. So there's Big Ben in London, and I could add Big Ben in as a place. If I go back to my map, so let's add a place mark. I'm going to put my place mark right there on top of Big Ben. Then what I could do is I could add a picture. So if I go to here, I'm just going to go to Google Image Search, and I'm going to search for Big Ben London. That looks like a good picture there. So I'm going to select that. So into my pictures, I can add more than one. Untitled place mark, and this might be Big Ben. There we go. If we're interested in that, I can give you some description. Recently undergone restoration. And then what I could do is I can have a small info box, a large info box. So it might be like that's not enough. I need a large info box. Can also change the drop pin and the color of the drop pin as well. So it might be, look, I think this is something that's a star attraction. So I'm going to change that to say star. And then all of a sudden I've got star on there. Also gives me things like longitude, latitude, the angle I'm looking for. I can always reset things to defaults at the same time. And then once I've got it there, I can preview it and see what it looks like. So if somebody else is coming to it, this is what it would look like. This is how it's been built over here. But for the person viewing it, so what you can do is instead of creating a Google slide, you can use Google Earth. And what the pupils could do is create a tour of London, or create an historical tour of the town or the place that you live, or curate a project. Maybe there's a project on the Amazon rainforest and it's deforestation. You could have the timelines which go over time. You could visit different locations there. So there's great scope within apps such as Google Earth to build really engaging learning content. And then what you end up building up within your project, there's the title of my project, there's the drop pin on Big Pen. I could go to new feature, I could add another place mark, I could draw a line between different places. If it was the Amazon project, I could draw a line between where the forest was in 1980 compared to where the forest margin is now in 2021. And you could show just how much has been lost. You could also take things out of here and you can add them as projects and save them to a folder. There's a huge amount of potential of what you can do, but that is all then saved in projects, and it will also be linked to the signed in version of their Google Workspace account. So Google Apps and Google Earth and also Google Maps are something that I wanted to showcase this time, because it's one example of an app that really does help to create immersive learning content. And it's free, it's available anywhere. And even if pupils wanted to go outside the classroom and use it at home, it's pretty much available to download on most platforms as a dedicated app, or if not, you just open up your web browser. Even if you aren't somebody who has access outside of school to a Google Chrome browser, which we hope they are, because it's free to download, but they might have the rights to install it, you could get it on another browser and you can still sign into your Google Workspace account, or you can use it without being signed in just for browsing around. But of course, you won't have any of the history that's there that's attached to that. If you want to expand the sidebar there, it's sat on those three lines, but if you want to, you can get to the same options that are here. And then the settings themselves, you've got various settings that will help to either smooth things. So if you think the animation of flying from one place to the other is too fast or too slow, you can change that there. You can go from orbital animations to local animations. You can change the way that things zoom. If you've got a machine that hasn't got a lot of space as well. So whichever type of machine you're using, you can bring it back so that the demands on it are quite low. So you've still got the opportunity to use tools such as these. Right, let's swap back over and we'll jump back to the presentation. Just moving across. I'm just going to go check as well if we've got any questions in the chat from earlier and examples of people using any other apps. Not at the moment. Again, feel free if you do want to add anything in there. I'll just jump back into session 5. Share. So I think we've covered all of the areas there. And again, in the Educator Level 1 exam, you may be asked to do this for real. So you need to know where the buttons are for 2D, 3D, or the Pegman for Street View. You need to know how to use the Voyager tours that are already pre-made to go and explore certain things, topical or not. And also how to create your own places like I did with Big Ben, or it was going to be maybe a wider tour of London, and then bring that into context. If you're not doing that yet and using those tools in class, it's a great opportunity to have a go at those and see if you want to bring them in and use them with the pupils that you are teaching. So it is a big thank you for coming along today. It's a bit more of a condensed session, although more of a deeper dive on Google Earth. Some people have been saying, where is the content from the previous session? So before we go today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the YouTube channel and I'm going to move across and show you what that looks like. Just again, swap windows here. Jump over to YouTube. we'll look a bit more extensively at YouTube next time and how we've done some of the things such as creating our own channels. So here is the URL for our YouTube channel. You won't find it just by searching. It's a hidden channel. It's private, but what you can see is that for all of the sessions that we've run previously, the videos are here and you're able to go in and watch those in your own time. There's a whole library that will build up, and if you need to and you're prepping to do the examination, they're all there for you. What I will do now is I'll go over and add that to the chat as well, so that if you are wanting to go and pick up that URL link, you can do that from the chats. It's in there now. And really it's to say, if there's any other questions, I'm more than happy to stay here and answer them. But if there isn't, what I will do is make sure that you can still get access. I'll stay here for a few more minutes just in case anyone does want to ask anything. But we will very quickly be moving into the last two sessions in this series. The last two sessions in the series, as I've said, are going to come up on the following dates. They're going to be session 6 on Tuesday the 30th of November. That's going to be around leading online and collaborative learning. We will spend some time there looking at how to create videos in YouTube, but also how you might use that to facilitate group work. And then session 7 is on Wednesday the 8th of December, and we'll be looking at promoting digital citizenship, but we'll also at the same time have a look at what might be coming up inside the examination itself, and letting you have a better understanding of what you might face when you press the button to start the questions. So as ever, thank you very much for coming along today. I hope you found this informative, and I will see you again soon on the next session. So for people that are here live, I'm going to stop the recording.